Hey there, rulers. DMO73 here, bringing you the feature match between Paul Reisman on a Seer Christie Elves list versus Logan Slocum and his Red Eyes Aristella. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, the Ruler School Circuit Series now offering our Q2 2024 circuit kits, and our guest lecturer members, Fight Ramen. Class is in session. So as we get started here, just a reminder that you should go get signed up for the May online Grand Prix to qualify for Worlds, taking place on May 18th and 19th. A link to that is down below. And you should also sign up for the June Ruler School Circuit Discord series to get your chance at winning one of our exclusive Top 8 Alice Circuit Series playmats. The link for that is in the description below as well. So here on the left, we have Logan Slocum, Dalton Slocum's son, playing Red Aristella Red Eyes with Crimson Spirit of the Wind Moon to be able to cancel something that's hasn't been paid will for. And Paul is playing Christie Seer Elves, kind of the list, similar take on the idea of Derek's list from the Minnesota GP. It's this idea of using Christie for value and also being an elf to help really proc things like Alberek and Hunter's area to just help you generate a large amount of value over the course of many turns. And Seer's more there just to provide this kind of suite of 5 treasuries. It's not really treasury focused. First up, we have a Lone Wolf of the Crimson Moon. So this is not going to have any kind of real buff to it right now. It's just a 2/2. And it's just going to get played, and then we're going to pass turn. Paul starts by trying to recover Christie there after drawing up to 5 cards, or drawing up to 6 cards, but you skip your first recovery phase, so just keep that in mind. And then just to see a pass off of an Amadeus Crystal. Logan coming in here with turn 2. I imagine we're going to see this wolf swing in. Well, actually, no, we're going straight into a glorious little moon. So this is already pumping up the wolf by up to being 4. And when the discard happens here, we're going to be getting a lot more damage. Discarding just 1 card, though, we do see a flip of the Little Red, the Wolf Girl. Keep in mind, this is a little bit of a learning moment here. You should always swing with the wolf first, because Little Red has to technically attack, damage something if she enters the field and there's a valid target. So the Little Red would technically have to hit the wolf, which is not necessarily a bad thing for this deck, particularly because it wants to then have the wolf hit another moon and reanimate and kind of go in. But it's a missed opportunity for damage here. Paul and Logan kind of missing that trigger, so we didn't go through with that. Just goes in for the swing, and we see an attack order to pop the Little Red, which then gets a magical wind chime to help Paul be able to not have to worry about burning coin, and being able to keep up the will pressure to be able to respond to whatever Logan might be doing. I imagine that might get used for a sort of progression during the recovery phase, since Logan is currently tapped out, just to set up for a future sort of progression or something else like that. Logan is, however, going to swing in for the 6 here, and Paul's going to take it and go down to 34. And then at that point in time, we're going to see a pass turn, so we draw for Paul. Just move to a recovery there. No sort of progress to use the magical wind chime off of that. Imagine we might see a Hunter's area here. Another, there is a Resonator in graveyard to hit. And yes, exactly that. We see a Hunter's area, which is going to try to reanimate the Spirit of the Crimson Wind here so that he can potentially put in Alberek or another elf if he has one. Does Paul have another elf to cheat in here off of the Hunter's area? Seems like not, which is a little unfortunate. This is also a little bit of a misplay here. Hunter's area does not proc the enter effect of the thing that it's reanimating. And so Paul seems to kind of have forgotten that fact here and goes to do a Fossil Girl in the City to cancel the enter effect of the Spirit of the Crimson Wind. But that spirit doesn't exist. So that's just something to keep in mind here. Using Hunter's area to make the wolf a vampire, we can flip over Helsing, which will remove all of its abilities, and at the end of the turn kill it, which will then draw you a card off of Hunter's area, and proc Trials to also draw you get you another treasury item, which is pretty solid, leaving Paul with still a good 2 will to be able to interact. I imagine we might see a Sealed Scroll or Kaguya's Pictorial Scroll go off here to be able to get there's Kaguya's Pictorial Scroll cheated off the trials to kind of pseudo draw 3. You see we do have that sort of progression there, and then also getting access to a draw card off of Hunter's area if he remembers, but it seems like maybe he doesn't. It did look like there was a Diversity Light Palace in Paul's face down there, so there is a world where Paul has a spot removal here. Oh, he didn't kill the wolf. He just killed the Crimson Wind with the Christie. That's an interesting choice. I'm just wondering that. So there is a world here where Paul is be able to kill something, get a treasury item to get Zeus Alice, and the next turn just hard cast the Alice Palace, Diversity Palace, to go for the like 2,500, 25,000 attack line, but doesn't go for it right now. Logan going for Ascending the Crimson Moon, trying to cheat a moon into play, hits another glorious little moon and does successfully perform the contract effect. So we get to flip over into Red Eyes. Currently, Red Eyes sitting at 1,000 attack, and going to be burning Paul for 1,000. Does get to potentially discard some cards here to hand size to pump up, which will be a very big pump since there are 2 of these moons that give +2/+2 for every card discarded. I do think there's a world where for Logan here where you just discard the whole hand. You're not really casting anything that's in that hand. You might as well cycle it, and you can get to some crazy huge number and draw into something better, especially if you're trying to go in for the lethal here. Especially since contract already resolved, right? You're worried about maybe a Lorite, but a Lorite doesn't stop the fact that you have Red Eyes going to be absolutely huge. Discarding 2 cards there. So now we're getting +4/+4, and times 2. So Paul is getting hit for a grand total of 1,800 damage off of this enter effect if he does not have a way to stop it. Looks like there's a Sword of Progression and a Diversity Palace under that one, which means neither of those is going to be really helpful there. He would need something like a second attack order. Ultimately just does take the extra damage. Goes down to 16, and then we see a Crimson Moon. So this is kind of huge. So now it's another moon. So now Aristella is an additional +5, and the wolf is now getting a huge amount of damage as well. It's getting +4 from the 2 discards, so it's based out to 10 plus 3 other moons. It's now 16. So the wolf is now sitting at 16, and Red Eyes is sitting at 21, and that's more damage than Paul can afford to take. He needs to be able to kill at least one of these things here. Ultimately, the best thing would be to kill the Red Eyes, and if he's playing Robe of the Fire Rat, you could get Robe of the Fire Rat to stop the damage from the wolf. And even more so, we're just going to flip Little Red for even more pressure. Little Red tries to flip over Little Red, but then catches that it wouldn't be able to do Judgment because it had been killed. So just remembering that Imperishable has to be active at the time the thing is killed in order to be able to flip it again. So just a little bit of a misstep there from Logan. I think Paul will help him catch it here in a moment. So because the Little Red doesn't have Imperishable, or does Paul catch that as well? We see attack order, goes to attack order the Little Red, and then realizes, oh wait, that wouldn't have worked actually. So didn't heal the Little Red. So just clarifying that the Little Red wouldn't be able to be flipped again here. But still, with what's on board, that's still more than enough to be able to push in damage. So attack order is going to come down here on something. This is the exact sequence I was saying before. We use attack order on the Red Eyes. We get Robe of the Fire Rat. Paul choosing to attack order the Crimson Wolf, which would trigger and potentially animate a new wolf, unless Logan misses that trigger as well. Goes to get Robe of the Fire Rat, and then just dies to the Red Eyes for being fully tapped out. I think we might have missed the fact that Red Eyes is not actually fire attribute. And we would have gotten killed by the Robe of the Fire Rat. So it goes to tap to prevent it, but it's not a fire, it's only a light. So just a misplay from Paul's part results in him taking the 21 from Red Eyes, and we go into game 2. So good lessons there to remember when your triggers are, to remember exactly how Little Red works, to remember how Imperishable works, and to track the attribute of cards. Down comes turn 1 with Paul taking the coin. Potentially a lot of damage here. We have an Immortal Little Moon, which potentially burns Paul for 6 and allows for a flip of Red Eyes. We are going to see an Energized Garion to stop that, so it doesn't resolve. Therefore, we can't flip over the Little Red to swing in for 12. If that had resolved, we would just be at 1,800 damage on turn 1 from Logan, which would be not a good spot for Paul to be in. So you draw for turn from Paul, draws from Christie since he had burned a card, doesn't get his first recovery phase. Please keep that in mind. Both players skip their first recovery phase. We have a Moon Shade here. And then a simple pass, which makes a lot of sense for Paul. The early turns are all reactionary, and Logan has to be applying pressure. So Logan is more than likely going to set Paul up to be able to do some spot removal here, to be able to get trials online and everything else. Peg 2, going in for a contract here. Awakens. It seems a little bit proactive. Since we don't have any other moons here on field, just hitting that Spirit of the Crimson Wolf. So here's the problem with this line, which will add a discrepancy between the life totals that Paul is at and what you'll see on screen. Specifically, you have to have moon additions for Red Eyes to have stats, and not just moons. So Wolf of the Crimson Moon does not pump up Red Eyes, so Red Eyes effectively does 0 damage there. And then also in this situation, swing in, you do 0 damage. Paul takes 5 each time. The Wolf, Little Red, the Wolf Girl, has to then pop the Wolf Resonator, so then that would also die. So Paul ultimately would take 1200 here if he doesn't stop it, ultimately choosing to flash in Lorite and then just block, so he doesn't take the 2000 or 1200. But that Wolf of the Crimson Moon would also be gone in this sequence if the enter effects had happened properly. It's one of the things about Little Red that you really need to be careful with your sequencing, is that Little Red does on enter shoot something, has to shoot something if it's viable. So even if it's your own resonators, it has to shoot your own thing. See a Call Stone from Paul. And now that Red Eyes is flipped, it's not really a huge concern for Paul. Its enter effect is kind of the biggest concern for Paul. We see that sort of progression come down here proactively during the main phase just to draw into another card. So because you can't contract when you're already under contracts, Paul's at a position where he could just work to keep additions off the field for the rest of the game, and then that Red Eyes is not going to be able to really hit him much at all. Paying another 200 here, we're going to play Hunter's Area to give Logan the Lorite. We're then going to try to make... This is an interesting choice. We're trying to make the Red Eyes Aristella a vampire as opposed to the wolf, so that we could just ping and kill the wolf. I think my personal preference would be that we kill the... so we can kill the Red Eyes. I think my personal preference would be kill the wolf, so that Helsing can just answer the Red Eyes there. Proactively gaining the Robe of the Fire Rat because he's just going to go ahead and pass turn, so the Red Eyes dies. But now Logan's at a spot where his contract is good again because he can flip, as opposed to just sitting on a 0-10 that's not really doing anything and gets blocked by the Helsing every turn. This is another thing that I think has come up in the conversations as well, is that there are some decks where like the only real turn that the contract is good is the turn that it flips. So like once you flip it, there's a world where you just keep it on the J ruler side and kind of deal with it that way so that the opponent can't get the major benefits of the enter effect again. This is especially true and also similarly in against like Killua, right? If they flip over into Predator and animate the Grand Leon, if you answer the Grand Leon, you answer the burn turn, they lose all their ice counters, so they no longer have draw power. They can't reanimate another Grand Leon, so like there's a world where you're just trying to keep Predator alive for your opponent, so they just miss out on value. This is similarly this perspective for Red Eyes as well. Down comes a lone wolf here. It's a very tiny wolf. It's just a 2/2. Certainly doesn't want to swing in because... Oh, no, it is getting +2 because of the wolf. So it's a 4/4 wolf. But you certainly don't want to swing in because that's just a free block for Paul. And we've got Robe of the Fire Rat to be able to prevent the damage. So Paul's going to be able to kind of contain this pretty well to spot remove and get more treasury items if he wants. And keep in mind, again, Paul's life total is 3,500, not 2,500, because the Red Eyes did not have any moon additions on field, so its stats didn't get pumped. Swing in for 4, decides to block with the Christie. It's going to die. That will proc its reveal effect. Hits a Crimson Moon, which is helpful, but won't reanimate the moon, but won't reanimate the wolf. It will mean that Logan's going to be able to flip Little Red this turn, which is really nice, and Little Red could then just hit the Lorite on his own side of the field, although we have a Robe of the Fire Rat. So Robe of the Fire Rat is a really good answer against Little Red, just because she's a fire J-Res. So no matter how big she gets, no matter how many moons you have, she'll never be able to actually deal any damage thanks to the handy dandy robe. Although we could search for another wolf here, which is pretty nice. There is a world where you could play wolf to then flip Little Red to then, you could get some damage in here by the wolf that you searched here. We play the wolf that you searched to then try to Judgment Little Red, like swing in with it, Judgment with Little Red, kill the wolf, flip it over, maybe hit another fire wolf, another fire moon, reanimate 2 wolves, kind of go in. Like, there's a very real world where you could put a lot of pressure on this turn for Paul, even if there's a cancel in Paul's hand with that one of Magical Wind Chime. You have 2 will here to potentially be able to make something happen. We see an Ascending to the Crimson Moon come down here after the Judgment of Little Red, who's currently getting, and that's not even going to get canceled. We get another Moon Wolf here. This time the Aristella is only swinging in for 5, burning for 500. This is going to be a lot of damage for Paul. So we do get to do, again, tries to do Robe of the Fire Rat, but can't. So has to then use Fossil Girl to do cancel the Enter effect. But it's still going to hit for 5. And then Little Red's going to hit for 16. So it goes down to 30. Oh, but we do see a Liberation of the Winds used here on the Christie to pop the Red Eyes. So it's going to kill the Christie. We're not going to be able to flip it again because we didn't flip it back using Hunter's Area. Chose not to flip it back. Having the extra wind body there to be able to pop it. Red Riding Hood can come in, but that's what the Robe of the Fire Rat's for. So all in all, we took 0 damage there, which feels pretty good. Now, the Wolf can swing in, but you don't want to, because right now it's producing a lot of will. We have 3 moons, so tapping that Wolf gets you 3 light will. A very real chance to just kind of put some pretty good pressure on there, especially if there's Spirit of the Crimson Winds, to be able to maybe pop the Robe of the Fire Rat. Little Red's going to get flipped back over. Does look like Logan has a couple of Fossil Girls in hand. That's not really helpful here. Does have a Awakening, Beginning of a Fairy Tale, and does have an Electra. So Paul might be in pretty big trouble based on if this Electra comes down next turn or not. But we do see the Spirit of the Beginning of a Fairy Tale almost certainly going to get cast here at the end of Paul's turn to generate a couple tokens and put in some serious pressure. Paul going to 3 stones. Uses the Magical Wind Chime to just cast a Sword of Progression to draw a card. And then it's going to probably use that sort of progression, I imagine, for something here. Otherwise, there's not really a point in proactively doing this. Oh, yeah. Solarizing it for Shiva so that we can pop the 3 things on board and get 3 +1/+1 counters is pretty nice. So pops those 3, gets a Trials trigger, and gets you 3 counters. The Trials trigger here would probably be best to grab something like Miracle Millennium Medicine to be able to hit the wolves in Logan's graveyard, since we're only working on 1 will. Ultimately does, though, decide to grab the Kakia's Pectoral Scroll to draw some more cards. And then just has to pass the turn there. So working with 1 will here, not super great. Calling a stone. 4C, chooses not to force E. And just gonna hard slam this Electra and say try to answer it. Things like a Fossil Girl or a Lowrite would be super great, obviously, to stop the enter effects because we can't cancel it. That's a sort of progression. Or maybe an Elvish Archer underneath. The Elvish Archer would be really good here. You could cast the Elvish Archer in response to her enter effects to make her a 1/1. So her damage to the board would be 100, and she wouldn't have the ability that says I can't block with anything. And then you're in just fine shape to continue to move through. Ultimately, though, we do see a removal of Liberation of the Winds from the graveyard to produce green for the Judgment of a Wind Ruler. That is just something you can do, which is really helpful because it sets you up to be able to make other liberations cheaper. We're going to see another sort of progression here just to get a card RFG'd. So I imagine there's another Liberation of the Winds in hand to use on the Shiva and the Electra. Paul accepting that he's going to go down to a very low life total, at least in his mind, although for us he'll be down to 15. Tuck those two back, use Liberation of the Winds to be able to kill Shiva and the Electra, but the Shiva has Eternal, which is really nice. So that'll pop those two. One thing to note is that the damage from the Electra will still have last known information as being 1600 damage. And technically, if Logan is playing the Chain Sickle in the sideboard, then we would still be able to kill this Shiva, which would still be kind of insane, especially since the enter effect, the Trials trigger still needs to have happened before taking damage. If Paul had grabbed, if Paul grabs a Zeus Alice here, that's a misplay as well. So it does grab the Zeus Alice. So technically that Zeus Alice would be on field at the time of destruction. This is why we build chases on the chase line. So just remember that as soon as the Electra dies, but before its enter effect resolves, that's when the Trials would trigger. So this Zeus Alice would be on field to then take 1600 damage and then get killed. So doesn't super work out that smoothly for Paul. Or just kind of missed sequencing here with how things are going. If you wanted to not have that happen, you just let the enter effect resolve and then do the liberation, but at that point in time you open yourself up to, if Logan is playing Chain Sickle, that Chain Sickle comes down and removes Shiva's Eternal, so that you don't have the thing to be able to do liberation with, which then you just die. So it's a little bit of a toss-up. We could have just, again, gotten Miracle Millennium Medicine here. Down comes an Albrecht, which steals a Spirit of the Crimson Wind, which is going to proc Trials, which is going to draw us a card up Hunter's area. And Paul at this point can just kind of sit. There's no real point for Paul to push it anymore here. He's got a bunch of cards. It definitely has an Elvish Archer face down because of Pictorial Scroll. Can just kind of swing in here with the Shiva and the Zeus Alice that shouldn't exist and threaten the damage next turn. If there's a follow-up Electra, we've got the Elvish Archer. We've got cancels in hand. We've got cancels face down. Like, we're in fine shape to be able to stabilize here. The Replicant Shiva is not really going to be able to do much because we can probably cancel that as well. Going to try to go in for another contract. That's going to get Garioned, so that's going to get canceled there. Leaves Logan with 3 total will here. If Logan was to try to go for a Replicant Shiva, it's probably going to get Sword of Progression. Second contract might be pretty good. We're going to go ahead and Awakening of a Beginning of a Fairy Tale. Just throw out a couple blockers. This is something that could have been done in response to the Shiva earlier to leave up a couple blockers. I think just kind of missed out on the fact that the Battle Wolves produce will. So it does get to draw another card. Now we do see a hard cast of an Immortal Little Moon, and this is where the distinction between actual life totals versus what Paul represents as life totals matters. Because for Paul, this is enough to burn him for lethal. In reality, this wouldn't actually be burning him for lethal, but we are going to see a removal of the Liberation to get another card into the wind area, paying 300 life to go down to 2 or 11 in our case, to hard cast a Replicant Kaguya and stop the cast of the Glorious Little Moon. This is also helpful because it stops the wolves from being reanimated. That's the biggest piece there, to be honest. And the Replicant Kaguya can also just serve as a nice beat stick for next turn to try to close out the game. Paul drawing for turn. Can just call Stone with Seer and just move into combat at this point. Doesn't have a lot of will to be able to play with, but does have access to the extra will from the Wind Chime. Goes to swing in with the Shiva, gets blocked by a token. We're going to see the Wind Chime used for a sort of progression to draw a card and bounce the token that's trying to block, which will then give Paul the 900 damage and a new card. Swing in for the lethal there with the other 2 cards, knowing that the 1 token can still block. Logan's like, well, I'll flash in the token. It's just for joking around, because tokens cost 0, but they cease to exist as soon as they leave the field. So Kaguya's going to swing in. It's going to get blocked by the other token, but everything could just swing in for lethal there. There's enough on board. So that is the match. This match did actually end at a draw at the locals where it was recorded, but we'll have deck profiles for these later this week. Until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.